humble respect to Guru Mahan, Guru Piran Sivasankaran, Guru Piran Neo, fellow Jnanis. Today I'm going to be speaking about the I God philosophy, but today I want to speak about what this I God book is about. And I see this I God book as a manual to divinize our life. What that means is that we all are, biological beings. At least, in this material world, we identify ourselves as biological beings. More specifically, we are Homo sapiens. At least in the class of animals, we are called Homo sapiens, who are, thinking biological beings. Um, and uh, and as part of this Earth and this species, we over our evolutionary stage, we have organized our lives in such a way that for thousands of years prior to being in a more cohesive way, we were somewhat like the other animals, quite you know uh, wild, and also we as a species had a lot of conflicts. We had a lot of conflicts not only with other animals, but we also had conflicts among ourselves. We had a lot of tribal tendencies, and those tribal tendencies have been embedded in our DNA. And you see that even till today, we still have a lot of those tendencies built in our DNA. Some sense, it has given us, these tendencies have helped us evolve, helped us, achieve a lot of positive outcomes in our lives. But we also have had our fair share of these tendencies causing a lot of conflicts, a lot of unhappiness, a lot of difficulties, a lot of challenges, and life. Some of the goodness, we have the sukhas, the great things in life because of this cohesiveness as a species. But also we have a lot of divisiveness that has caused a source of a lot of conflicts. So life, in a sense, that for human beings have been a lot of ups and downs, a lot of positive things that have happened, but also a lot of challenges. That's across humanity. But we also see that in many people's lives, in all our lives, we also have gone through our own fair share of struggles, our own fair share of challenges, and also our own fair share of successes. And many of the successes can be attributed to many factors. And one of the factors is that some of the challenges, for some people, some of the challenges became foundation for their development, their growth, and also their trajectory to soar, at a very high level of consciousness and high level of development. So Swamiji here, through his own research and development, his own introspection, contemplation, reflection, and meditation, at the age of 11 years old, had a lot of inquiry and inquisitiveness, and this explorer in him, that wanted to know what this thing called life was, and what is this thing which we call as God, and whether this could be realized. So at the age of 11 years old, he had this intensity in him, and it never left him, and it continued on. He thought about it, he introspected, contemplated, and tried all kinds of meditative processes until at the age of 38, on the 7th of January, his guru showed him that a path to this inner pilgrimage, and everything became very, very clear. He left his normal profession, took on this, a role of, going deeper within himself to discover. And over his course of his research, development, and also this exploring, he discovered many, many secrets. He perfected the art of that self-realization meditative process called Kundalini. What he was taught, he picked it up very quickly, but he also improvised it so that it could be imparted to everyone in a very simple way. It is not just meant for jnanis or people who are taking a life of austerity, but he wanted to share this joy that he got to everyone, irrespective of race, religion, educational status, social status. So he went on to this journey of this using Kundalini meditation to dwell deeper within himself. And as he was experiencing this, what was called a mystical force, he realized that this mystical force that has been spoken about in this scripture, in various scriptures by various masters, as this amazing mystical force called Kundalini, he didn't want it to be a mystery. He didn't want it to be remaining as mystical. And it's not surprising because he had this explorative mind. He had a very inquisitive mind, and he was somewhat like a scientist wanting to know what, why, how, when. All these questions were in his mind at the age of 11 years old. So he started feeling all these mystical experiences, and it did not satisfy him. He says, I need to know what this is about. And would this mode help me to achieve my goal of God realization? And like a scientist, he sat down and he was feeling all these experiences, and he started documenting it in his diary, one by one experiences, the things that he did, the austerity that he undertook, the different types of food, the different types of temperament, the different types of. So he explored under control condition and under non-control condition to see how this Kundalini, power that he unlocked had an impact, had a bearing on him. And he went deeper and he realized that to really understand to transform this mystical force and the mystery into mastery, he needed to bring in this exploring mind that will decipher what this mystery is. And through research, development, and the acquisition of jnana, this perspective of introspection, contemplation, reflection, he was able to then describe what this kundalini was, what this unarvu was, and what the relationship of this inner vibration, the cosmos within himself, the cosmos outside him, and he was able to unify both what's outside him, what he's seeing, what he's experiencing, and what he was and he is. So he realized he was able to unify this to realize, and the Kundalini was the mode to achieve this oneness. What he saw was a lot of multiplicity around him, and he realized that there was a lot of discussions of this oneness in many of the theologies, but he was seeing multiplicity. And he realized that could Kundalini bring him to that path of that oneness? And this is where this mystical force, he deciphered it step by step in bits and bytes, trying to understand what this force was. And ultimately, he realized that the multiplicity was because of this small I identity that sees, this imprint in everything, this vibration in everything that manifests as different vibrations, and that gives you different cognition. And as he went deeper and deeper, he realized that this multiple vibration that he's experiencing coming from this one source called the cosmic vibration or the big I. As he was able to do that through this Kundalini practice, through enabling the mind to, get the resonation of that Kundalini, which is a cosmic vibration. And he started going deeper and deeper. And he realized the ultimate source of all the different vibrations was this one cosmic vibration, which he called the big I. And when he acquired that, he realized that what is inside him and what's outside him and what's within him, everything is the same vibration in its essence and its core. And this is where he started documenting that journey from the small I to the big I. And that documented journey, that documented exploration uh, was then all documented in this manual called I God. So this treatise called I God is actually Swamiji's journey through this process of convergence from the small I to the big I. And this, he documents it from his description of what, this higher order continuum is, what God is, what, I is, what the universe is, and subsequently everything that we know about life and what we experience as life and what life is all about. So today I'm just going to give you how Swamiji describes this manual, how this manual is critical for divinizing our lives. And I want to bring you to some of the question and answers on how he describes what this manual is about. So it is actually a manual to help us understand the divinity, who we are, how the divine thoughts and desires and the experiences, how to make sense of all this so that our journey in this life becomes more experiential, enlightened understanding of not only us, but everything. So you can say that the I God philosophy or the I God book is a theory of everything. So I want to take you through that discussion, the discourse between Swamiji and a disciple. So here it is. So the disciple asks Swamiji, is this book written by you? And of course, the first instance is that when you look at the book, the book is written by, Jnanavalal Paranjyothi Mahan. I got the secret power of Kundalini. And when the book was disseminated, when people acquired the books, they started reading this book. They saw many parallel ideas that was there already in many scriptures in this I God book. So, and a disciple asked Swamiji, did you write this book? And, and Swamiji says, no, it is not. It is written by you. And if you look at this question, if you look at the book, his name is there. But how is it that he's giving a very different answer? And the disciple got a little bit confused. And you'll see later on the answer becomes more clearer. So he got a little bit confused. He said, look, it doesn't make sense at all. The book shows that it's Jnanavalal Paranjyothi Mahan that wrote this book. So with that confusion, the disciple then goes on to ask, have I written? I've never written any books, right? And this is the part that is really important. He was saying that, have I written the book? The moment when I say, have I written, what is the I that I'm talking about? So he was looking at himself as that material identity, that I, that small I. He says, this small I did not write it. So he has got the query in his mind. The disciple has a query in his mind. And he says, look, have I written? I never wrote this book. So he's asking Swamiji. And Swamiji then, Swamiji comes with a universal lens. And the disciple is using a small eye lens. Swamiji is using a big eye lens. And this is where he is going to teach the disciple with this question and answer on how the lens that he is seeing it in a very limited way, whereas Swamiji is seeing in a more universal way that encompasses him too, his eye too. So again, Swamiji, gives that little bit more illumination. He doesn't give the entire answer. He just gives it in bits and bytes to take him through that journey. And that's the beauty of a great teacher, is that they don't give you the answer straight away, or they won't tell you, okay, look at the answer behind the book. Actually, as a matter of fact, they'll take out the answer behind the book, right? So what he's doing is he's slowly nudging him and his mind to start going deeper. What is this I-ness that you are talking about that you cannot see? Why is it that you cannot see? Because you're using that lens of the small I to see a concept that is written in this manual of this universal I. And this is where you can't connect. So Swamiji is slowly nudging him to expand his eye so that he can see that connection. So he says, the disciple says, have I written it? Swamiji says, yes, it is the I that has written it. So he's already now saying, what do we mean by this I? What I am I talking about? So if I was on the disciple platform with a limited platform, this is I mean, I did not write it. It's Swamiji that wrote it, because I'm seeing the separation between I, this physical person, and Swamiji as a separate person. I did not write it. It's Swamiji that wrote it. So I see that separation. But Swamiji tells him that, and Swamiji is sitting on a universal platform. He says, yes, it is the I that has written it, right? And he says, you have written it yourself. Look at it carefully. What does it mean? The disciple is sitting on a smaller platform, small I, and that smaller platform is sitting on a bigger platform called big I. And Swamiji is sitting on the big I and say, yes, your platform is also on my platform. So if your platform is on my platform, which is universal, that means that you are also owner of that bigger platform. You also are part of the bigger platform. So if you look at it very carefully, that big I that is in me is also in you. So what that big I in me that is written is also the same big I that is powering your small I. Hence, what's written by the big I that is powering my small I is the same as the big I that is powering your small I. So this great universal concept comes from this big I. It's describing, the description of the big I is given by the big I itself. So it says that if you look very carefully, you will see that it is you who wrote it, that you is that big I inside you that has written this too, which is also supporting me and you, supporting my body and your body. Right? And this is really important. The reason why is that when you are sitting on a small I platform, and when these great philosophies are spoken about, you would not have a connection to it, and you will see it with, oh, wow, look at that philosophy that is written by that person, or maybe, it may just completely pass by you and you say, look, it may not resonate with you and say, okay, this master is speaking about it, it's nothing to do with me. Or you would say, wow, this is a great philosophy that is experienced by that great master. But one who understands this and lives and revels in it, when a master speaks about it, he says, I know what he's talking about. He's talking and he's describing something that manifests in me that I have experienced. So he's talking about me. So when he speaks about this experience, I got it. So, and that only happens when one is sitting on that same platform as the Mahan, or that universal identity. So Swamiji is telling him, look at it very carefully. You have written your own symphony. You are not aware of it. Right? You have written your own story. You are not aware of this. This book is a description of how, the mind functions, operates, behaves in a small platform, behaves in a limited way, and evolves, and also converges knowingly or unknowingly. Right? There are times that we know there are many things that we know. There are many things that we know, we don't know, but it happens. And why does it happen? Because there is something, intelligence in us that makes it all happen, even though our material intelligence may not be there. So we have that understanding. So in this, Swamiji tells, if you look very carefully, what this book is describing is not just about me, but it's the universal identity in you. So what is written is also written by you. So quite a profound, description he gives it, but in two lines, in a very simple way. He says, "Utru utru noka." Look very, very carefully, intensively, and you will see that this story was written by the big guy that also manifests in you. So when you read my book, when you read this book, you'll be able to resonate. This is like a homecoming for me. When I read this book, it's like a homecoming because I know what this book is telling. It's my story. It's not his story or history. or his story. It is my story that Swamiji is describing that I've forgotten. He's reminding me. So this is what in this question that I got from Swamiji's teachings that, this makes a lot of sense. In the early days when I was reading Swamiji's book, it just flipped by. But as I started introspecting, contemplating, reflecting, and meditating, then I realized that whatever the book is saying, I know what he's saying. I've experienced this, right? And so you can get that connection. So this is the second question. The third one, again, the disciple asks, what is the authority for this claim? You're saying this big guy and all these ideas, what is the authority? He says very simply that I am the authority. Who is the I? It is not the ego that he's talking about. He's talking about the big I, that cosmic intelligence in me that manifests as everything is the authority. That is the big I that every scripture talks about. That is the big I that every master speaks about. Every book that has been written, as an authority on this is written about this big I by the big I. If you take a look at some of the scriptures, it shows how the Lord speaks to someone to say, I am there with you. I am walking through this journey, right? And this great scriptures is written by this big I, about the big I, to show that the big I manifests as everything and every entity, sentient and insentient, including the reader and the person who's speaking about it. So this is where he says, Niena, naneni, nium, nanum, nanena. You and I are one. Go back and take a look at all the scriptures and you'll see this imprint there. So Swamiji says that, I am the authority. I am is that big I is the authority that has been spoken about in all the scriptures. It's the writer of that scriptures. It's the seeker of that scriptures, and also is the experiencer. This is the part that is now more important. I've given you a prelude to what Swamiji is leading to the next question. The disciples say, is there no support from other books? Swamiji says, dear disciple, in order to attain my patronage, all books praise and seek after me. When he means my patronage, it's not him as a physical person as the Mahan. He's talking about the big I that manifests as the Mahan. So he says that every book writes about this big I or this Holy Spirit or this, you call it whatever name you want to call it. He says every book speaks about this, because of my patronage, because of my grace, because of, they speak about it, and he says that instead of, thinking that it's separate, instead of thinking this book has been written by somebody else, if you consider this book as written by you, who is that you? That big I that manifests in you. So he says that the big I is reminding the small I that I am powering you. You are a manifestation of me. Hence, this is not separate from anything. Why this is really important is that, I'll finish this description. I'll tell you why Swamiji sees this oneness in everything. He says that, think of this book as written by the big I, which is part and parcel of your core. He says, if you really understand this truth, then you will see that I and you are one. Myself, that consciousness that animates this body, and the big I are one. Myself, the I, the small I, and the big I become one. And he says that oneness is what gives meaning to all the books. Every book and every master speaks about this big I. They describe the big I in different ways, as different manifestation in different times. And he says that they're all speaking about the same thing. Without that book, without the big I, the books have got no value. The value comes from the big I. In that same way, any, book or any speech or any description without the big I does not carry much weight. And he says that, that's what that I God book gives you. It's a book of authority because it is about the big I. It is written by the big I, and it is found in all the scriptures, which all the scriptures also talk about and give reverence to. So this is what Swamiji is taking in a more holistic way. And that is why you see that his teaching is universal. It cuts across every scriptures and every masses, across time, irrespective of 5000 BC or modern time, today or the future. So this, he gives that, he gives that support to all the books. And that is why you see that in his teachings, he says that stay in your own religion and attain enlightenment. And why is he saying that? If you're born a particular, religion, know what I'm saying about the big I and use that lens to understand your own religion better, so that you see that oneness, not just in your religion, but also all the other religions. And this is where we slowly start shedding off our tribal, identity to a more universal identity, a more, individual and personal identity to a more indivisible and universal identity. And this is where we see that we shed from the small I to the bigger I. So, and that is what this I God manual is about. So what we see here is that then he goes on to ask, he says, what is the use of studying this book? So it's getting deeper and deeper, trying to understand what this manual is. So Swamiji says that, I'm glad you asked this question. He says that this book gives you, the gist of all philosophies, because it's a philosophy of the big I. He says that for those, and if you understand this book, which is universal, I call it, this book gives you the theory of everything. And it gives you what I call the general theorem. If you are a mathematician, you will know what a general theorem is. It covers for all circumstances, right? And he says that it covers every philosophy that is written by man, and every philosophy that is spoken by every masters and scientists and thinkers and scholars, right? This I God philosophy. If you see the all the vakyas, it's all talking about this, right? Without any, in a more universal way. So he says that, this book is useful for those who are searching for truth, those who want to seek that knowledge, whether you are a scientist or whether you are a seeker or whether you are a, philosopher, it gives you that foundation to go deep within yourself, to go to the last core, or what the last, frontier of understanding everything, which is our own consciousness. So he says that for those who seek after this true knowledge, there is room to attain and to make further fruitful research. So what he has done here is that he's given this simple framework, which he calls the I God philosophy, to use it as a foundation to explore many, many things. And as a scientist, you can explore how this universe was, and describing the universe from matter to energy to light to sound, and you can go on, right? Uh, as a philosopher, you can think about, what's the state of consciousness mean? Am I seeing something, or is it experiencing? So as a philosopher, you can go deeper using this knowledge, right? The same thing, you can use this knowledge as a professional. If you are in a professional life, how do I use this knowledge to become better? Suppose if you are a CEO of a company, how do I use this knowledge to enhance my leadership? Not just become a chief executive officer, but more importantly, before becoming a chief executive officer, executive over, having executive power over the corporations, the operations and directions. This I God philosophy will enable you to become a chief enlightenment officer. You become a chief enlightenment officer before you become a chief executive officer. Because if you're not enlightened, you cannot have executive direction and power. So this knowledge is very useful if you are in the corporate world. If you are a householder, how do you use this knowledge to ensure that you're able to have greater understanding with your spouse? How from moving from individual to now a partnership that you build a family. Again, that requires a CEO mindset, a chief enlightenment officer, because it is now managing a dual relationship. And if those relationships are out of sync, the marriage becomes problematic. So how do we use this Mahan's knowledge to build harmony so that two persons' vibration is resonating with the same universal resonation? And they produce children that also are, harmonized. Their frequencies are also harmonized. They also are, if you have many children, they have different frequencies. Different children have different frequency, and you have to allow that for them to grow and develop and make their own mistakes and learn and relearn. But how do as part of this journey, how do we enable them to grow in a harmonious way, give them the skill sets to become explorers, to try different things, to have that calm and peace in their mind, the clarity, and the seven P's that I spoke about for them to generate the 10 capitals, right? So again, it is part of being a chief enlightenment officer in a household. The same thing with the community. How do we manage our communities, to support those who are struggling in our communities, the vulnerable groups, marginalized groups? So again, as we acquire this knowledge, how do we become a chief enlightenment officer for our community to ensure that those who are finding it difficult and challenging are also be able to harmonize their lives through inspiration, through providing support for them to stand up on their own. Somebody shows how this can be done. So the same thing also that you see in this manual, it speaks to agriculturists, economists, to politicians, to people of multiple hold multiple roles and responsibilities. And if one uses this knowledge, one can flourish in all these different areas of life, harmonizing the different facets of life. So we see that from astronomy A to Z, how to manage zoonotic diseases, right? So this is what this book gives. This book gives us the tools to be able to build a vibrant, inspiring and amazing life and the ecosystems around us. And that is what he's describing here. So, and he goes on to explain a little bit more. He gives illustration, and he says that this book gives you three important things. He says that this book actually, the results of all the attempts by many thinkers in many eras to find the truth. Many people have tried to seek this truth. Scientists have gone in their own way of describing and understanding the truth through scientific experimentation, by discovering telescope and microscopes and all the tools to probe into the microcosm and the macrocosm. And to some extent they have discovered some things, but they always come to the end and they say, look, what else is beyond this? So scientists try to discover this material world through a object way of looking at things. Ultimately, it comes back to where does it all come from? And it needs a subjective exploration. And what Swamiji's book here is bring the two together to show how both the subject and the object are interrelated. So it helps a scientist that is exploring this universe of us using, empirical and experimental and an objective search. The same thing we see that in many of the scriptures, there's a lot of discussion of, the forces within us and the way we chant things, or the way we describe things, and to understand this reality. And Swamiji unifies this through experiential practice of this Kundalini, and that mastery through this introspection, contemplation, reflection. He unifies the two to make sense of how various yoga practices, how particularly Kundalini could be used to enable the mind to achieve that sense of sublimity, quietude, the clarity, to raise that bandwidth of that brain so that the mind is able to process this complex information, to decipher this very, very complex, uh, you know, uh, understanding of this true reality. And through this process of unifying this, Swamiji was able to give a little bit more insights into what this Kundalini is, what this reality that we speak about in the context of small I and big I, and that convergence process. It is spoken about in the scriptures, in many scriptures. It's spoken about in many of the scientific literature, and he brings both the scientific, he brings all the different schools of thoughts together, whether it's Dvaitva, Advaitva, or all the other practices into one simple, unified way. And this general theorem is able to give explanation to all the special cases that is being described in the science literature, special cases that are described in the Advaitic teachings, and special cases in the Dvaitic. So he's able to unify everything as one. So this is where he says that, again, he says that, so that is the first part, is able to unify this confluence of schools of thought. He's able to bring it together into this confluence of ideas and thought process and unify that. And he calls this I God philosophy, which is a general theorem of the theory of everything, theory of nothing and everything. And in that process, the special cases are all that you can find, that is described by all the masters and all the scriptures that have come before this. The second thing is that he also, the truth that he found from the Kundalini Yoga, through this, experiential inner journey, he was able to get that universal bliss and that universal joy that leads to this unconditional love. And this is what he says, that, he talks about the Summa Irukum Sugam. He says that beautiful abode of joy and happiness that is not related to anything material. He says it's that inner beauty, that inner joy, inner grace, that he says that this journey describes, gives you that experience. Many scriptures and many masters have spoken about this experience, but they have not documented, many of them have not documented how to get it. And this Mahan describes this and shows how one can achieve this. And finally, he says that, this knowledge that he has given is not just, very comprehensive, but it is the general, the most comprehensive way of understanding everything, without any leaning towards any schools of thought or any belief systems. And it's universal, it encompasses everything. So people of every background can, based on their own special circumstances, is able to unlock this secret, incorporate it, experience it, put it into their daily life, and chart a direction and course that will give them that enlightened living and experience. And all that is done without any pomp and pageantry, or without much cost. Actually, there's no cost. It's only you that has to sit, put in some effort to unlock the secret, or this mystery, transform this mystery into a mastery of yourself. So Swamiji says that, what is the use of studying this book? He says that this book is somewhat like, one can, like a lighthouse. You see, this lighthouse is, all of you all know what this lighthouse is, right? It is in the darkness, in the turbulent ocean, the captain of the ship is looking for direction where the land is. And the lighthouse gives the direction that here I am. In that same way, all of us are bobbing up and down in our material ocean. Sometimes we can't see it. Sometimes we're in a state of ignorance. Sometimes we're looking for a glimmer of hope or glimmer of something that gives us the direction. And some, if we are lucky, we have a guru that shows us. If we're lucky that we have a book that guides us. So here, Swamiji says that this book is like that lighthouse, that in that moments of turbulence, in that moments of that absolute darkness, it gives you that glimmer, that lifeline to show you the path. And he says that the book is like a lighthouse. For me, the book has been an amazing treasure. It's a lighthouse that has shown me direction in many, many facets of life. So again, Swamiji describes this as that which gives us illumination at all times. So coming back to this, so who wrote this book? If you take that I am thee and thou art I, who is this? Who is this writer of our story? Right? And the writer is none other than, if you see at the molecule, if you look at the lower level, oh yes, molecular, atomic, we are very different, or biologically we are very different. So these are all small I state. But if we took it from the big I and it's written by that inner cosmic intelligence, that cosmic intelligence of big I, that as describes the big I, and it's written by someone who's locked on to the big I. So a mind that is locked on to the big I is describing or inspired by the big I to write about itself. So he says that while my body has been a channel to write about the cosmic intelligence, it is your symphony too that is being described. Hence, that symphony that is passed through my body, that is written this I Got book, is that same author that is reverberating in you, but your mind has not realized it. The day your mind has realized it, you realize that the symphony is one, the body may be different, but the song is the same. So, and the author of the song is the same, and we'll all be standing on the same platform. So he says, who is the writer? The writer is none other than the big I that he's talking about. In that same way, he says that who is the lighthouse? He says that the lighthouse is none other than the illuminator within all of us. We all have that lighthouse that gives us guidance, gives us direction, gives us, that path to that, the oneness, right? The thing is that is the captain of the ship know how to capture the signal of that light, or read that light, or capture that light, or know where to look for that light? If the captain is blind, by materiality, they will not see that lighthouse, and they will be going in circles, bobbing up and down. So Swamiji says that unarva gavanipa. He says, keep your mind focused on this inner vibration, that cosmic vibration, and that gives you direction. He says, like how one observes, be attuned to that lighthouse that gives us illumination and direction. The author, the primordial author that writes our story, writes our poem, writes our poetry, look out for that writer, that illuminator that gives us direction, that writes our story. Not his story, it's your story, the I story. So this is what this description of this manual that Swamiji has written, given us, is to show us that, that big I is the writer of this. Know the writer very well. Know the lighthouse really well. Know the illuminator really well, so that you can write your story really well and be inspired, and always have the direction of wherever you are, whatever you're doing, you have the direction, through this illuminating light that is resonating in you. And this is what that I God manual is for me. Sandosham.